with the last 5 minutes that we have, we had two questions that came in last night that I'm hoping you can just spend a couple minutes addressing. One, specifically just added protections. We alluded to it earlier about for restaurant owners and restaurant workers. I know you're working on some stuff related to that. I'm not sure if it's too early to share. You can share some stuff about that. And then also we had a question about for any protections for small landlords. So landlords, obviously, who, there's a lot of landlords in New York who have tens of thousands of properties, and then there's some who have 4, 5, couple units, and obviously they're in a different position. And if there's anything that they should be aware of, I think would be helpful to know.
Absolutely. And I just want to say to the second question, I think that so much of the time, and I'll just say this as a bona fide progressive, so much of the time when we talk about landlords, what we keep out of our minds and out of the jargon is that there are small landlords. We have to have integrity when we speak about these things. And I try my best to always remind all of us about that, because landlords is a very big category. And if we just jumble everyone together, it's a very dangerous thing to do. And it will hurt a lot of people who rely on that income from their smaller tenants to actually get by. And it might not even be that much money, but the point is that we can't just group them all together. So I just want to be very clear about that with everybody. Okay, so let's start just with restaurant owners and restaurant workers. So I've been working on a number of bills with regard to the recovery of the restaurant industry, which, as I'm sure all of you know, the restaurant industry in New York is absolutely vital to our entire economy. It provides millions of jobs to New Yorkers. And so this is something that I think is not only critical, but it's really one of the most important blocks of how we build back better. And also, just one small note is that before the pandemic, the restaurant industry was really they were not in the best of situations, right? They were struggling financially, even if they were getting by. So I want to be very honest about that and let you all know that I know that. And so to this measure, I introduced the One Fair Wage Bill, which, if anybody's interested in looking it up, it's S8406. This bill eliminates the sub-minimum wage for food service workers, service employees, and miscellaneous industry workers who receive tips. And so what this bill does, essentially, is it expands upon the governor's action that he took late last year, which ended the sub-minimum wage for miscellaneous workers, and will basically put New York on a path to establish full minimum wage for all categories of employees by December 31st of 2025. So we've been working, my office has been working, and my team has been working very closely with the National One Fair Wage campaign on this bill. One Fair Wage was passed in California, just as an analogous example. So the sub-minimum wage in New York City is, as I'm sure most of us know, absolutely not a living wage. Although employers are required to pay workers the difference between their tips and the minimum wage, wage theft is rampant throughout New York City. And so what happens is that workers often feel that they have to basically put up with harassment from customers or even from their managers, who encourage them to wear revealing clothing or behave in a certain way to attract tips. And research has really demonstrated that customers tend to tip Black workers less than white workers. And so providing equity and fairness to restaurant workers would absolutely help to reduce the wage gap and bring New York in line with many of its sister states, including California, in workers' rights and fairness on the job. So that's the workers aspect of this. I want to also just note that if you were a restaurant worker who was let go or who was furloughed and you applied for unemployment, that unemployment is actually based on the amount that you make without tips, right? So a lot of the restaurant workers were receiving in unemployment $100 a week or a little bit more, which, as I think all of us can agree, especially as New Yorkers, that's practically impossible to live on. So just keeping that in mind. So with all of the parts of this bill that I just mentioned, I'm also developing legislation with members of the restaurant industry, because I really do believe you have to work very closely with whichever industry is impacted, no matter what bill you're working on, to make sure that we provide relief for restaurants and small businesses who participate in the One Fair Wage program, in order to give them financial support for a smooth transition. And so yesterday, I hosted a briefing with ROAR. And if you're not familiar with ROAR, absolutely look them up. They are amazing. ROAR is an acronym for Relief Opportunities for All Restaurants. And they are a coalition of restaurant owners. Some restaurants that you probably know, like Lilia and others, very, very cool group of people. And so we did that to really hear directly from restaurant owners about their needs, their priorities, any type of ideas for solutions. And I had members of the Senate there to listen to them because, again, oftentimes we're moving so quickly through these pieces of legislation or these policies without including those who are most impacted, which is frankly crazy. So I also just want to note that for those who may have missed the news, and I mentioned it earlier, but I'm going to mention it again, the governor announced that he will be allowing, starting on September 30th, indoor dining with restrictions. This is basically what is going to be allowed, okay? And also just one small note is that in certain counties, indoor dining is already permitted. So in Westchester County, indoor dining is already allowed, but in New York City, it is not. So this is really an extension to bring New York City in line with a lot of the other counties across the state. Okay, so this is what's going to happen. There's going to be a 25% occupancy limit, which will be different for each restaurant. Temperature checks will be required at the door for all customers. One member of each party will be required to provide contact information for tracing if needed. There will be no bar service, so bars will only be used as service bars, a source of making drinks and serving them to those who are in the restaurant, but nobody will be allowed to sit there. Masks will be required to be worn at all times when you're not seated at the table that you're at. Tables must be 6 feet apart. Restaurants are required to close at midnight, which as New Yorkers in New York City, that's obviously, a very different change of pace, but it's, I guess, better than nothing. Strict adherence to all state issue guidance is absolutely required, although we can talk about enforcement on another time and really what's going on there and just how challenging that has been. Restaurants will also be required to operate with enhanced air filtration, ventilation, and purification standards, which, by the way, if you're a small business owner, you might not be able to afford to do. So again, this is another barrier for entry. Also, there will be a limit on air circulation. Excuse me, sorry about that. To allow for outside air ventilation, and then outdoor dining, of course, will continue in the interim. What I will just say is one small note about this is that I think that this is the time for all of us to get as creative as possible. If it proves that indoor dining does not work, which if I had a crystal ball, I would probably rub it, and that would be the answer, that it was going to lead to some issues. But putting that to the side for a moment, in the early 1900s, when we had the Spanish flu, really as a pandemic that was killing so many people, the way in which we handled schooling was we had outdoor schooling, which, as you can probably see, is happening in some places across New York City now. We can do that with restaurant owners. There's heat lamps. There's ways to get very creative. We could have tents on the top, open on the side. I think that we really do need to think outside of the framework that government's providing us, because I don't think that government is used to being flexible or nimble or thoughtful or meaningful or even put themselves in the situation of business owners. And so I say that because as you speak to your clients and they ask you for help, I think they really need to know too that they are also the leaders of this, that yes, the government can provide some infrastructure, but they're the ones that know best. And they're the ones that can actually create a model that can transform the way we even do patronizing of restaurants moving forward. And I think that because of the world that we're living in, we're all kind of like sitting and waiting for that next rule to come and like following it, saluting and kind of going on. But this is the time to get creative. So reiterate that to everyone. And then for the second question, which is the question about small landlords. So very quickly. So since the beginning of the pandemic, I have been very clear about being in solidarity and standing in solidarity New York's tenants and their landlords in making sure that we call for the suspension of rent and mortgage payments so that we, again, provide this financial relief for them. There are several pieces of legislation that are floating around in both houses to address this issue. And one in particular, of which I am a co-sponsor, is the Rent and Mortgage Cancellation Act of 2020. This is Senator Salazar's bill. The bill number is S8802. It will create a universal right to relief from rent payments for tenants during the state of emergency, while also providing financial assistance for residential co-ops, affordable housing providers, and landlords that can demonstrate hardship that results from payments canceled because of this bill act, as well as, by the way, for public housing authorities. And so there's an entire summary of the provisions. What I'm, instead of going through them, what I'll just ask is Maya or Leanne to please put the summary of those provisions into the chat so that if anyone is interested in the extension of what this bill does, you will have that information, and you'll also have the bill number so you know exactly what to look up. But what I will just say is that we have not done enough for small business owners. And so the crux of this bill is that this bill will suspend mortgage payments for all small homeowners for the duration of the COVID-19 state of emergency and for 90 days after it ends, and then provide protections for homeowners who use these protections. And so this is just one of the many bills that I think we have that are meaningful really for small business owners. But again, we have just not done enough. And it's probably one of the most frustrating things that I struggle with on a regular basis. Just yesterday I was talking to Senator Salazar, and both of us had said to each other, like, can we just get back to do our job so we can make sure that we can actually provide relief? I mean, it's incredibly frustrating right now to have a key to unlock a solution and to not be able to access the key. You know, it's like right there, but you can't actually reach for it. That's what it feels like. And so we're going to continue to be very vocal every time that we put pressure on any one of the issues that we care a lot about. It has worked, even if it's taken a little longer. And so that is why your voices matter really more than I think the world wants you to know. And so please call your elected officials. Please have your clients do that. I mean, part of being civically engaged is also making sure that if you're civically engaged, you're tapping somebody else into the civic engagement. And I think we don't do that enough. I mean, I'm doing this if I'm like in line at the grocery store, although nobody can really hear me now because I have a mask on. But I mean, any time that there's an issue, I always say, who represents you? Call them. I mean, it's our jobs. We work for all of you, even though some elected officials will make it seem like you work for them, which is not real. So please do that, encourage that, and tell them to keep calling, because there really isn't a set number that will unlock action. But I'll tell you right now, I will absolutely pay more attention to the person or group of people who make a lot of noise, because it's human nature to. Because if somebody is making something an issue and it's coming through the door at a rapid rate, you're going to pay more attention to that than maybe perhaps the person who called one time, or that one issue over here. This is the time to do it, okay? And so get as many people as possible, create coalitions around these things, because there isn't enough that has been done in the state of New York, and we can do more. And the way we do that is the inside-outside game. So help us do that inside-outside game together.
Yeah, I see that Maya shared where you can find out who your rep is in the chat, and we're going to circulate this webinar to our entire network. We'll make sure to include that link and some of the other links that you posted in that email when we send it out.
Right. That's great. And by the way, even if I don't represent you, you can call my office, you can email us. We are here to help whoever. I refuse to turn anybody away, no matter if they're emailing from Buffalo, Brooklyn, it makes no difference. I represent the Bronx and Westchester, but I help everybody. So just know that. And if the issue becomes so big or it's so district specific that I can't handle it or provide a solution for it, I will absolutely make sure that you are connected to your representative so that they can do that for you.
Amazing. All right, Senator. Well, thank you so much for your time. I certainly learned a ton during this call. I'm sure our clients and people in the network have benefited as well. We're going to circulate it. Wish you all the best. Thank you for all your hard work on these important issues, and hopefully we connect soon.
Thank you both. Thank you, Cooper, and thank you, Lee. And thank you all for participating and listening. And if you have any questions at all, just please reach out. And everyone stay safe.
Stay
Thank
safe.
you.
Take care.